welcome to Uptime Logistics today. I'm your host, Doug Draper, and we got a great show for you today. Before we jump in, I want to remind everybody that the show is powered by CAP Logistics, so I want to make sure you check those guys out for all your transportation and logistics needs. Today, as I mentioned, I'm super stoked about getting together with our guests. It's a unique topic. It's very relevant in the last 365 days. And I'd like to welcome Billy Demong to our show. Billy, welcome to Uptime Logistics.
Hey, thanks, Doug. It's great to be here.
Nice. All right, so I'm going to give you a quick intro so our people know who the heck you are, and then we'll learn a little bit more about yourself. So this is exciting for me, Billy. So I'm just going to read it because I don't want to screw it up. But Billy Demong is an American former Nordic combined skier. We'll learn more about what that means in a minute. And an Olympic gold medalist. He's five-time Olympian. So Nagano, Salt Lake City, Torino, Vancouver, and Sochi most recently. So it's just so cool to have you on the show and talk. One more thing I want our audience to know is that you actually met your wife through the Olympic world, and she's a former skeleton athlete.
Yep.
And and the last thing that I thought was super cool was that you were the flag bearer for the closing ceremonies at the Vancouver 2010 Olympics.
That was the craziest day of my life, but yes.
We'll have to learn about that. And here's the last bit. I keep saying this is the most cool thing, but you are the first American ever to win Nordic gold. That is super impressive. On a professional level, Billy, and then we'll jump into it. You're the former executive director at USA Nordic Sports, currently doing all kinds of public speaking. And I think on your LinkedIn profile, it said pretty much ready for almost anything. And as long as it's legal, right? I guess We'll start with that.
Well,
so. Cool.
Hey, it's great to be here. Like you said, I was a Nordic combined skier, which is one of the original Olympic disciplines, combining the ski jumping and we're talking about the distance jump, both the graceful one, but the one a lot of people associate with the agony of defeat. But kind of the modern day Formula One of the Winter Olympics. And then it also is cross country skiing. So, the two original ski sports, when Norwegians invented skiing hundreds of years ago, it was originally used for transportation, which of course, racing cross country was kind of the first of the ski events. But then they early on, decided to get a little more extreme. So they started ski jumping. And that was, mid 1800s is about the first real big King's Cup competition in Norway. And by the time the first Winter Olympic Games in 1924 were contested, Nordic combined was one of the few original Olympic disciplines, which includes bobsled, figure skating, cross country, ski jumping, Nordic combined, obviously. And modern day alpine, as we know it, wasn't around yet because it wasn't chairlift. So that's kind of my background. And like you said, I was fortunate enough to win the Olympics in 2010, which was a lot of things coming together. And then for the last 6 years, I've been at the helm of an organization called USA Nordic Sport, leading our athletes and our community into the future.
Yeah, that's great. Well, you and I wouldn't be talking today without that CAP Logistics connection, right? So most people may not associate the Olympics with transportation and logistics, and maybe some do. Maybe I'm not a big enough nerd to associate that. But anyway, tell us, how did you get connected with CAP, first and foremost?
Well, so how I got connected is really small world, but I consider myself a logistics master because let's face it, you think about the Olympics, the athletes got to China, but what you're missing is not just how they got to China, but the hundreds of competitions that our athletes have competed in, especially the last couple of years during COVID, in countries all over the world. Most of the ski events are happening in Europe, quite a few in Asia these days, not a lot in the United States at the international level. And so we've been, on any given week, I'm planning, 80 individual coaches and athletes traveling to 6 or 8 countries around the world on the same days. And we're moving massive amounts of people and equipment around the world, on a small budget. So, that's sort of my logistical background, both from my athlete days as well as now as the administrator overseeing this whole show. But on the flip side, about a month and a half ago, we were planning a Continental Cup event here in Park City, Utah, and just a couple days out, we realized that we had a critical piece of measuring equipment for the International Ski Federation race director to use to make sure that the competition was fair. And we only have one in the United States, and it had been left after a competition that was recently held in Connecticut and had been taken to Lake Placid, New York, but we needed it in Park City, Utah. And so with 48 hours to go, I'm like freaking out, trying to figure out if I can fly somebody from Lake Placid to, from New York to Utah, and the tickets were crazy expensive. And honestly, the people that could make the trip for that weekend were very few and far between. And so I ended up hitting a really good friend of mine, Chris Miller, and just saying, I know you work with cargo, I know you work with logistics companies. Is there any way you can help me? Because I had even tried to apply for like Delta Cargo, and they're like, no, you need to pass a background check. You couldn't get it in time. And so, he basically called Cap Logistics. He's like, hey, I've got a client, and these guys can make it happen if it's possible. And got a call directly from Cap like within minutes, and it was like, oh yeah, okay, all right. Well, we'll just send somebody over to grab that thing. Which we're talking Lake Placid, New York, 5 hours north of New York City. Really, it's in the middle of the largest state park in the United States. It's 6 million acres. Somebody went and picked up this box, drove it to Boston. I was able to track it real time on my phone. I watched it get on a Delta direct flight to Salt Lake, and then some guy drove it up here. And I happened to. He didn't actually tell me when he was coming. He just said he's coming. I'm coming in a bit. And so I was like, all right, I got time to run quickly down to the store to get some stuff. And I'm coming down the road from the ski jumps in Park City, and I see this white delivery truck go by, and I like call the guy, and I'm like, was that you? He's like, yep. So I ended up getting the other end of this, 14 hours after it left New York on its own, in hand on the side of the road. So it was incredibly cool experience, and it saved the day for this competition.
Yeah, that's an amazing story for sure. So that's just one small piece of equipment that you talked about, but I want to jump into the logistics of kind of moving an Olympic team, and that absolutely was an intended pun. But maybe you could talk about, I think when you and I were chatting a little bit earlier, there's a logistics of moving people, right? And we're just fresh out of spring break, so there's plenty of folks out there that had to logistically move their families on their spring break. And then you got the other piece, which is the equipment and things of that nature. And that's the part I really want to focus on, is not the people, but kind of the equipment, because it's just not one guy throwing some skis on his back and saying, here I come Olympics. There's a whole lot more to facilitate an entire team internationally, on time, safe and secure. So talk to us about that process and what that looks like.
Yeah, again, I mean, like the road to the Olympics is not just who's best at the time. I mean, our nation and especially in our sport, we have to qualify spots. So again, going back to like kind of that world tour, the World Cup tour, we have to move and go to all these competitions, and they're in Scandinavia, they're in Central Europe, they're in Asia, they're in North America. And so we're moving not only the people, but like you said, we're moving the equipment, and the equipment isn't as simple. It's not just the pair of skis you see on television. For every pair of skis you see on TV, there's probably somewhere, depending on the discipline, between 10 and 50 other pairs that were there just in case the conditions were different. You know what I mean? So we're testing a lot of equipment as we're moving around, and that equipment has to be everywhere we go. And to the point where not only are we moving the skis, but now we're moving all the equipment to service the skis. So, big boxes full of different types of wax and, fluorocarbons, all these different tools. And, in addition to all that, we have all the other equipment that goes with ski jumping, et cetera. And so when we're traveling the world, we're literally looking at, how do we get the people there? Now, how do we get the equipment there? And a lot of times it's like, it's not even just a price thing. It's more like logistics. Like, when we're going to Finland, we know that the flights that go to, let's say, Kuusamo, Finland, which is essentially the intersection of the Russian border and the Arctic Circle. It's out there. We know that every day 5 or 6 planes land in Kuusamo. Now, only 1 or 2 of those planes is actually big enough to take the jumping skis. So right out of the gate, we're making decisions. Are we going to fly the skis with the passengers, or are we going to fly them with one person to Helsinki and then rent a vehicle and drive them up? What's going to ensure that this stuff not only gets there, but gets there on time? And, you got to think, most of our stuff is never in a place for more than 4 days at a time. You know what I mean? It's constantly on the move. And so again, all these things are part of my daily process, as you said. I actually, and we'll get to that, but I just finished my second Olympic Games as an administrator. So 7 Olympics in a row. It was time for me, and I've worked with my board on a transition process. But right up until now, the end of the season here in 22, I've been overseeing the logistical process for, like I said, 60 athletes and 20 staff to move around the world on any given weekend.
Wow. And I'm sure you have a massive team behind you assisting you, right?
Yeah, massive team of like a handful of coaches who are traveling themselves, who are actually really very scrappy and efficient about how they do this. And that's one of the things we talked about, Doug, is, because we're operating in such a resource scarce environment in terms of humans and money, we have to be really, really efficient, right? So when we go to rent our vans for the year, or when we're going to rent vehicles or plan flights or whatever, we're constantly looking for that one extra. Like, how do we save a little bit of money, move an extra person, like only hire one person who can cover 2 or 3 things. And so again, it's logistics all day, every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The creativity and innovation, if you will, to try to figure it out. And I'm sure, I bet if you're a carrier, or this is just kind of a general comment, and you could, give me a thumbs up or thumbs down, but I think there's got to be a pride of service, pride of ownership to say, I am now in charge of ensuring that my Olympic team or my qualifying team to get to the Olympics, it's in my hands. And if these skis and equipment don't get to where they're supposed to get, I personally could have an impact negatively. So have you found that the people you partner with are super excited and stoked about working with the Olympic group?
Absolutely. I mean, like, you're never going to find a group of athletes that's more personable, more thankful, and easier to work with than like Nordic Olympic skiers. You know what I mean? They're humble, they're hardworking, they're really, goal oriented. And so like all of our partners, like they're just from NYU Langone, Sport Performance, to backcountry.com, like everybody's into the fact that they can really work with the athletes and support the athletes in a way that has a real big benefit for the athletes. And on the flip side, they get to be part of that journey, and it's created so many win-wins. And that's one of the things that I really enjoy the most about not only the job that I had, but what I'm going to be doing going into the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we talked about efficiency, and then another kind of buzzword that you and I spoke about was innovation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the story that we had talked about, that's not really logistics related, but really defines the concept of innovation. I think it's important for our audience to understand that. And it was really the mindset that you were involved with USA Nordic not really being a powerhouse, and the paradigm shift of how you approached all aspects from training to equipment and the whole 9 yards, and how you got the team to buy into that, and some of the cool stuff that you did outside the box. So talk about the innovation, and then how you got the team buy-in, and some of the cool stuff that you did to really take the team to the next level.
Yeah, and I mean, actually, to even peel that back a little bit, and kind of departing from the pure logistics connection, obviously with Cap, but
yeah.
What we really focused on, and I've been like you shared 5 Olympic Games. We had a leader that came in and he said, we're going to do what America's never been able to do, which is win medals in this sport. And as a young athlete, there was a group of us. So when I say as young athletes, it's really referring to the group that we moved together to train together to be part of a small sport in a big country. And we started building the belief that we could win. And we got really close by our second games in Salt Lake. But what we realized after was that we weren't taking care of some of the more like detail-oriented things. So when we start talking about efficiency and especially innovation, it was after we had gotten some experience and really started to build the belief that we could win those first medals. Because when I was a kid, I think I shared with you, like it was like 30th. That was like a goal. You know what I mean? Like America,
Mm-hmm.
we can be 30th at the Olympics. That's good, And as we started to break it down, we realized, no, what we really need to do is actually, be in this longer, more like long-term, goal-focused, strategic plan focused. And we need to become more efficient and more innovative than the other teams. And so, what you shared just now, like we really created the best possible situation when we hired back one of our teammates from the 1998 Olympics who had gone on and gotten a degree in exercise physiology and started to really network within the Olympic movement from track and field to cycling and looking at what other sports were doing to improve, especially on the physiological side. And he had a group of maturing Nordic combined skiers, myself, Johnny Spillane, Todd Lodwick, and the Camerata brothers, who were willing to take a chance and try something different. So instead of doing what Norway did every day, which was like, get up, we get up, we eat bread, we go for some ski jumping, and then we have some more bread and some jam and some brown cheese, and then we go, for a run, and then we come back and, we eat some pasta, and then, we go to bed. So every day, the best in the world were doing both things at once and trying to get better at both things every day. And when Dave Jarrett, this coach and former teammate of mine, came back as a coach, he said, look, guys, if we take a different approach, if you trust me, and we're like, we trust you, let's try something. We were ready for change. He wanted to try something. He said, let's try to become much more innovative about our training. And so what we did is we laid out a 4-year timeline through the Torino games and said, okay, if we're actually going to get better than Norwegians, we have to do something better or different than they do. We can't necessarily do more. And he said, look, we can't be better at ski jumping and cross country skiing every single day because the two are almost diametrically opposed. It's like trying to get better at the marathon and the high jump. Your fast twitch adrenaline sport versus like slow twitch, like cardio sport. So we started to periodize our training, and we created like macro cycles of 4 years and then micro cycles of months within the 4 years. And really it was about building up and breaking down and building up and recovering. And we started to actually do like months at a time where it was only cross country focused. Let's put in a huge base, like a specialized endurance athlete. Let's not worry about whether or not our jumping gets worse. We're just going to build the base we need to get better at the cross country portion of this. Then we're going to come back and we're going to recover and we're going to get fresh. And now we're going to work on the jumping because we've already taken a step in the cross country. We're not worried about that getting worse. So we're able to then, instead of going like this, like trying to push both up at the same time, we pushed one up and then held that gain. And then we pushed, both sports up over time. And like I said, it happened, week to week, month to month, year to year. And that was like a total departure from the way the rest of the world was doing it. And not just in Nordic combined, but even in the specialized disciplines of ski jumping and cross country. Like we were much more likely to take time away to do something else that would make us better in the long run than just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result. And then that really extrapolated, essentially we became more efficient with our time because instead of trying to do two hard things at once and get better at both, we're like, no, let's focus and make sure we get better at one, take the gain. Now let's go focus on the other. And then that led, once we kind of figured out the training and we were able to prove that out, to all sorts of like, you get a little bit of confidence from success. So we started to play around with a lot of things, including, I think we discussed before this, but the folks at home, I think, would be fascinated. If anybody is a endurance athlete, you're familiar with like live high, train high, which is like, essentially cyclists, triathletes, runners, a lot of endurance athletes moving to altitude, whether it's in Colorado or whatever. It's a known fact that if you live at a lower oxygen level, even in a tent at sea level, you will grow more red blood cells. You will have physiological adaptations to build a bigger engine. The problem you run into is that most racing happens at sea level. And so now you need to tune this bigger engine to be able to use the fuel that you have when you go down. And so, we used to drive down to Salt Lake, live in Park City, which is pretty good. Or we'd go down to Europe or go to San Diego or something to get down. But, again, you're going to Europe, you really kind of want to work on, and this is just a Nordic combined thing, but like we wanted to work on our ski jumping, but here we are trying to get faster across country. So now we're kind of going backwards on what, we're trying to achieve by, breaking out our disciplines and trying to improve. So we actually started training in Park City at altitude with supplemental oxygen. And the way it started was like just trying something new. We put a big tank next to a treadmill, and a nose cannula and just pumped it up. And we're like, all right, yep, I can go faster now. And then we slowly developed that into a much more refined, data driven process where we measured our lung capacity and our respiratory rate at like a hard effort. And then we created like customized reservoirs for each athlete. So, if you needed 200 milliliters of oxygen per breath to bring you to sea level, you created a 200 milliliter reservoir. And then instead of running it through your nose, you ran it into your mouth through a big open hose that had this reservoir. So every breath, you're taking in that extra bit of oxygen. And then, of course, after time, we're like, all right, we got it dialed. Now let's take it outside. So we got carbon fiber, D-cell oxygen tanks that fit in a Camelback. And we would now all of a sudden we're living high and training low and not even having to like sleep in another bed or go for a drive, So everything from that. And then going back to ski jumping, ski jumping is literally like the Formula One of winter sport. I know people think of Formula One and they probably think more of Alpine. And Alpine for sure has got the speed and they have a lot of equipment, things that they work on. But, again, like ski jumping, everything is like Formula One because like every detail of the suit that the athletes wear is measured. It has to fit within certain rules, but there's always some flexibility, right? Like whether you can find a different way to put a suit together, like by panel to give it a better shape in the air, something more aerodynamic, or you can get better material from a different manufacturer with a different weft, is what they say in fabric. Like maybe it's smoother to the touch, and in a wind tunnel, it'll test actually this creates more lift at a braking speed of 90 kilometers an hour. I'm just throwing something out, but we started playing around more and more with the suits. We started bringing all the manufacturing of our suits in house to the point where, in that awkward transition from we used to buy them off the shelf and they were a size whatever. I want a size 50. All of a sudden it became customized. You had to fit within the rules. Now all of a sudden we're trying to find that performance edge within the rules, and like the athletes had to learn how to sew, and we started traveling with sewing machines and constantly tweaking, changing. And the same thing started happening with skis about midstream in my career, where the skis themselves, the manufacturers were able to play around more and customize the way the skis react. And as a skier yourself, I think, you think of skis as how they react on the snow. Well, in ski jumping, it's how do they react in the air. So they actually started to tune the skis. And if you watch it in high speed, the skis actually flex a little bit to climb into the air after you leave the takeoff. And so we started playing with the skis and then the bindings to create different angles that the skis would actually plane out in the air and create more lift. So again, you're talking about constantly trying to improve. And obviously, the further anything progresses, the less return you get. But the more important that return is, because the 10th of a percent or the 1%, if you're hugely lucky, is for sure the difference between first and 30th at the Olympic Games.
Well, that's a lot to unpack on that. The question that was just resonating is the buy-in, right? Because you just talked about really, I refer to it as a paradigm shift, right? So the athletes, right? You can tune and tack, and I get that. But if I'm somebody that says all my life I've trained and done both disciplines every single day, and we have to do them every day, or we're going to lose out, and talk about the buy-in with the team.
That's a tough one.
Was it pretty easy, or what happened there?
Again, I mean, it's a tough one. It was pretty easy for us. We in our team have had a very good culture of teamwork, and therefore, because the way it developed, it really developed in Colorado, in Steamboat Springs in the 90s. It went from like, hey, America, we're good enough to be 30th, to like, no, America, we're going to win medals someday. And when that paradigm shift happened, at that point, it created this culture, because by demand, if you wanted to be on the team, if you wanted to be part of this team that was actually goal oriented, not just like we'll send the best guys we've got, but we're going to send the best team and we're going to build that team, it became, you need to move to Steamboat. You need to show up in the morning at 7 a.m. every day forever. You need to, and then as you start to get involved in that kind of a team environment, your ego, if you have one, gets beat up real quick. And so if you're not buying in, if you're like, I know better, I'm going to do my thing, you're not going to survive in that kind of environment, because you can't be good every day if you're going to be great. And so it takes a team that's going to work together at the appropriate level, take the ego out of it, and work on the right things. And so when you're asking about, buying into like something completely different. I mean, I think there might have been a couple of naysayers on our team who like very quickly either got out or got on board, and that's been a really powerful kind of way that our team has continued to develop over the years. Is that it's more about the group, because success is really defined by the team and not by the individual. But it takes individuals that will continue to push that level so the whole team can rise with them. And that's I think the really powerful way that I've felt, not only in sport but also in business life, is like if you surround yourself or are part of a group that really is mission driven and focused on the overall result for the group and for the team, for the company, for the organization, then you're going to come to work with a different attitude. Like it doesn't matter if somebody hands you a broom and you're the CEO. If something needs to be swept and that's going to keep the team up for the day, or keep them off task, then the CEO is going to sweep the floor. And that's a lot of how I ran USA Nordic the last like 6 years was, hey guys, everybody here, in order for us to go and grow and get to where we need to go as an organization, I need you all to do 5 to 10 jobs. But guess what? I'll do 15, and like it's gonna suck, and we're gonna laugh about it together. Let's go. And when you're willing to lead like that, and the team buys in like that, even when people get tired, like everybody looks around and they've got confidence. Like, okay, I can keep going because everybody else here is willing to do it.
Yeah. That's crazy. You just defined from an outsider's perspective, literally just now when you were talking through that, the perception is it's an individual sport. There's an individual on skis moving by themselves. There's an individual going off the jump, and the success has not been that way at all. It's been focused on the team, which is great. And we're also writing a script for a movie. I could see this whole thing coming together as how to bond and create team to achieve a goal. So
yeah,
very cool.
I mean, I could tell you, if you ever get a chance to watch the race from 2010, there's 2 Americans. Here we are. We never medaled in the sport before. My teammate Johnny Spillane and I had gone back and forth over the years, like, and the nice thing again about having a team where people can take turns at the lead without a lot of ego allows people that need to take a little bit of a break, even if they're still going to work, they're still competing hard. Maybe they're just missing that little bit to be pushing the envelope. So like, I remember I got hurt one year and Johnny won world championships, and I was happy for him. But the nice thing is that we were so close that I was like, okay, if he's good enough, that means I'm good enough. Because like we've trained together, we've competed a million times. Like I know I'm as good as he is. I don't have to say it to anybody. I can say it now, but at the time it was just what I needed in my head to say, okay, now you're ready to actually think that big. And then on the flip side, there were times in our career, like the Olympics, where I led the way. And so when you watch that race and the 2 of us are together for most of the race, the goal going in, and we talked about it before the race, was not for me to beat him or him to beat me, but it was for one of us to win. In fact, we basically stopped short in the cabin right before the race started to say, okay, here's the plan. We're going to go out, we're going to catch everybody, we're going to take the lead, we're going to try to drop everybody. If we can't, we got to go hard, like, at least a K out if this guy, or this guy that could outsprint us are with us. And then I think what we never really thought through was like, what happens if it's just the 2 of us? And then I think we're just like, well, we'll just burn it out and see what happens. But we literally went into that race, and we did benefit from that sort of team approach to an individual sport, because again, not every team, and it's actually rare to find it. Not every team thinks like that. So when we first brought like bike racing tactics to Nordic skiing, it was like revolutionary. Now you see it a lot more, but again, that sort of teamwork to be able to say, hey, Doug, how are you feeling today? You're a better sprinter than me. And you're like, hey, I'm feeling pretty good. Okay, I'll lead. You sit in. And then when you're ready, you go, and then that guarantees that you can give your best effort, because I'm willing to like help you do it. Because at the end of the day, it's more important that one of us win than you and I fight each other over it. Yeah,
very cool. So I'm going to come back in a minute. We're going to do some rapid fire questions, which I think our audience will enjoy. But before that, it's almost a pretty big shift, but I want to get your feedback kind of the Olympics and where do you think they're going to be 5 years out? You know, and I'm not really sure, not a specific piece of the Olympics, but just how it's changed and where you think it'll be 5 years, whether there's increased number of sports or whether interest levels are going to taper off or interest levels are going to explode in certain, certain areas. So 5 years from now, what does the Olympic scene look like as the games go?
Well, so that's a great question and one that I'm super geeked on. So the Olympics in this country has always been a hugely popular endeavor. You know, like right from the get-go, 1924. I mean, 1932 was the third Winter Olympic Games, and it was held in Lake Placid, New York. Right. So the U.S. has really embraced the Olympic movement all along, but it's gone through a couple of really tumultuous times. I think most people would be familiar with the movie Prefontaine, or the story about the runner Steve Prefontaine. And essentially, like during his career, there was a shift, which he was part of, that, basically athletes rose up and said, listen, like we're going to the Olympics, but we need more support. We need, more oversight of how, and more, more guarantee of a fair process to qualify to go. And so the Amateur Athletic Union was the group that was the organization that was overseeing the Olympic movement. Congress came in the 70s, and they came in and they reset it a little bit, and they created a monopoly, which is now called the U.S. Olympic Committee, U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee, through the Amateur Sports Act. And what that did is it created a monopoly, a federally mandated monopoly, that was able to monetize the rights of the rings to then do all of this oversight and logistics and everything else for the Olympics. And that worked really well for at least 3 decades. But over the last couple decades, as the amount of resources they're able to derive from the monetization of the rings has decreased, I'm sure you've seen it. Everybody's seen it in the news. Athletes are paying their own way in some cases. There's just not a lot of support. I think the average Olympic athlete is making about $15,000 a year, which isn't much money, but when you think about it, most of the Olympians aren't making any money. There's a handful that make a lot of money, and then a few that are, and then a lot that are paying their own way or just breaking even, etc. And so what I see is right now, Congress has passed the Olympic Reform Act about 2 years ago, and that actually seated a new commission almost identical to what happened in the 1970s. And that commission is comprised largely of former and current Olympic athletes to study the movement and to come back to Congress and say, this is the direction that Congress needs to go to continue to make America one of the best countries in the Olympic movement. And I think this is really going to be what's going to change the landscape in the next 5 years, because this is now happening. This got passed, it passed 2 years ago, and it got its funding in the last omnibus bill that passed a couple weeks ago. And so we're going to see that take place over the next year, and likely in the next 2 years, Congress will have taken action on that. And what I see from that is not necessarily like a handout, no, like a direct new tax to fund the Olympics, but empowering maybe the USOPC further to operate a national sports lottery, like what the United Kingdom, or I should say Britain or Germany or Norway or Australia, how they're funding their Olympic movement. So that would create more resources for programs and for direct athlete support. On the flip side, there's the World Class Athlete Program, which is a little known part of the military. And we have a couple athletes that are in that program, and they're basically full-time active duty armed forces members that are assigned to pursue the Olympic dream. And it's very small right now. It's about 50 total, but that could be expanded and create additional career pathways. And it would not only put more resources in athletes' pockets to be able to afford rent and training and all the other things, but it puts them into like a really nice career pipeline where they can go into the armed forces when they're done. They can go to officer school. If they finish college, they have access to GI Bill and education and really good health care. And there's obviously a lot of accountability with becoming a member of the armed services. So there's a ton of different things that I think will be vetted, but within the next 5 years, I think that's going to be the biggest shift that's going to happen. And what that is going to do is it's going to make the Olympic movement a lot more fun again, especially the closer you get to it. Like right now, it's a resource constrained environment. As this gets more resources, you're going to see a lot more focus on like how good Americans are, because they obviously would be better if there's more athletes able to stay in sports longer, train harder, and focus more. And it's a lot more fun when you have resources to play with and you're having success. So I don't know. That was a long-winded answer, but it's obviously something near and dear to me.
Yeah. No, it was a great answer. I had no idea. What's the name of the piece of legislation again that was passed 2 years ago?
It's called the Empowering Olympians Act, I believe.
Okay.
It's essentially.
Cool. I just wanted to see if our audience wanted to take a look at it. So, well, hey, this is going to be kind of fun. So I'm going to fire off some questions for you, right? So we'll start with a softball here. So tell me what your proudest accomplishment has been as an not only Olympian, as an athlete, but potentially even just in your Olympic career.
I mean, honestly, the last 6 years with the USA Nordic is my proudest accomplishment. And again, going back to resource constraints, my sport was cut from funding after I retired entirely. And so I basically took the helm of a small organization called USA Ski Jumping. We merged in Nordic combined and women's teams, and started building all of it together, from the community level, from the clubs from Alaska to New Hampshire to the World Cup teams. And as of now, it's almost 500% bigger financially and athlete wise than it was 6 years ago. And it's it's got a nice foundation and a bright future. So I think for me, that was a much harder and heavier lift than winning the Olympics myself. But making sure that the next generation of athletes and far into the future, Americans can excel in the sports that I love, ski jumping and Nordic combined. That to me was number one.
Yeah, that's very cool. That's very cool. So the next one is, what's the best piece of advice that you've received, not given, but a best piece of advice you've received when you were an Olympic athlete?
Big trees grow slowly.
You got to elaborate on that one.
So yeah, I mean, short, but there is a very, very amazing exercise physiologist who used to be at the U.S. Olympic Committee in Colorado Springs, named JT Kearney. And when I first started on the national team, I was like eager and like super focused. I'd already been to my first Olympics, and going into Salt Lake, we were on this learn to believe, or build the belief to win. And he came with his 10 rules, Kearney's 10 rules of the endurance universe. And it was like, Kansas is boring, but you got to go through Kansas to get to Colorado. You know what I mean? Like, food is fuel. If you can't find anything else, the Snickers will do just fine. And like, one of the biggest ones was big trees grow slowly. And at the time when you're 17, 18, 19, and you're trying to build this belief, and you're one of the better ones in the world, it's hard to know and believe why it's going to take another 5 or 6 years for you to become the best in the world. And so it took me probably a couple years after Salt Lake in 2002 to really fully start to grasp what JT Kearney meant by big trees grow slowly. But what it did is it turned my mindset from like, I'm going to win the Olympics and at 21 years old, and then change my name and move on with my life. And it said, okay, no, actually big trees grow slowly. It's realistic to think 2010 will be the time when it's possible. Now let's back that down to where we are today.
Nice. All right. Here's the next one. Cross country or jumping?
I mean, obviously I would say both, but if I had to choose one, cross country. And it pains me because I love the adrenaline rush of ski jumping, but man, cross country is such a lifelong pursuit.
Very cool. Distance or speed?
Ooh, speed. I know. That's why I'm a Nordic confused guy.
Yeah, nice. Book smarts or street smarts?
Street.
Love it. If you said book smarts, I'd say we got to rewind this whole thing and start over. That
wouldn't align with my LinkedIn profile, School of Hard Knocks.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so I know you can't say all of them on this question, but tell me which one of the Olympics that you attended was your favorite one, and then give me a piece on why that is.
Vancouver. And I'll tell you, like, Vancouver was almost like a home games. It was like a home away from home. Canada was great. And the other thing that probably made it even better for me than Salt Lake, because Salt Lake was an amazing Olympics, is I was mature enough to be in the moment and enjoy it. Salt Lake, I was 21, trying to win the Olympics, stressed out, didn't have any fun. Vancouver, won the Olympics, totally relaxed, and just enjoyed every moment of it.
That's nice. All right, Billy, this is a logistics show, so I think we need to wind up with that topic. So at the beginning, when you talked about how you were introduced to CAP Logistics, you were talking about a device you had to get from New York out to the event. So tell us, what was that thing? What was that device, and why is there just one of them in the U.S.? And so wrap us up and explain all that.
Well, I mean, it's funny that you asked. So, I mentioned innovation and jumpsuits and all that. So in modern day ski jumping, now that we've all been exposed to wingsuit flying, one of the things that's got a really, really tight tolerance is the crotch measurement. And so the machine that we needed was one that we use for, making suits, but also what the International Ski Federation, race director uses to make sure that the athletes are adhering to the rules. And so what it is it's like literally this stand that's like very official. The athletes stand on it, and then they it's got like force plate to make sure you're not on your tippy toes. And then it has a measuring device that comes up and it says, okay, you're 80 centimeters off the ground. And you have to pass that measurement at the top of the hill and at the bottom of the hill. And so that's how they make sure that you're not jumping in a wingsuit, right? And so we had the one device that we have in the United States that we use for all of our international competitions and for our team suits. And so again, one thing that we needed for the weekend, we didn't have it, and it was a crotch measuring device.
Well, I don't know if I've ever finished up a show using the term crotch measuring device, but we're going to do it on this one, so it's a first.
Well, it's not a fun device to use, but you're welcome to try it next time you're in town.
Yeah, I don't think so. So, well, Billy, we started as a logistics discussion, and we really got a better understanding of the Olympics, and I'm glad we did that because it's been a fascinating discussion, just not only how the team has succeeded and had that paradigm shift to really have the team-focused winning mentality, but also learn a little bit about yourself and perspective on the Olympics. So, Bill, I can't thank you enough for spending the time and joining us today on Uptime Logistics.
Well, Doug, hey, thanks for having me. And to be honest, I'm so happy that we were able to make this happen. And I can't thank CAP Logistics enough for helping me make our competition happen here last month.
Great. And I'd like to thank our audience at Uptime Logistics. Obviously, it's powered by CAP. We talked about some of their amazing stories. And you can find more information about the show in the description below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. And please visit caplogistics.com for all your transportation solutions. So we will catch you guys next time. Thanks for joining Uptime Logistics.